Are we seeing dramatic planet-wide disturbances on Mars? Are these changes of Mars indicative of an overall interplanetary climate change that is occurring throughout our entire solar system? Is Mars growing in atmosphere? Is it having strange winter activity during times that it would normally be in summer? Are we seeing atmospheres changing, hurricanes appearing, clouds appearing, all these bizarre things suggesting that once more our solar system is moving into some new energy zone and it's having massive, discontinuous, amazing effects on the planets? Those are only some of the questions that we are going to explore in this week's episode of Wisdom Teachings. Mars is somewhere between the Earth and Jupiter, and of course between Mars and Jupiter we also have the asteroid belt. We've talked before about how the asteroid belt was originally a super-Earth. This is according to mainstream scientists like Dr. Thomas von Flandern, as well as classified studies. Remember, one of the first things that I compared notes with on Corey Goode's testimony was the pro word brilliant pebbles, which is not a public word, it's a code word for a secret program. And Corey knew exactly what brilliant pebbles was, which was the reverse engineering of the asteroid belt back into a planet. And that was a very highly advanced computer simulation. They discovered that all the different parts of a planet like Earth were existing there in asteroids, that the comets were the oceans that had frozen into snowballs, and that Mars itself had once been a moon captured around this planet, but it also, interestingly enough, was Earth captured around this planet, but it also, interestingly enough, was Earth-like, had oceans, and was habitable for intelligent life. So whatever took place that blew up that super Earth was extremely catastrophic. It sent debris all over our solar system, smashed up a whole bunch of stuff, and it knocked Mars out of its lunar orbit, and Mars then occupied a new niche in between the Earth and Jupiter that it hadn't been in before, with the asteroid belt now appearing in between. So it's very clear that there's something strange about Mars. There is a strange history to Mars that we're not normally thinking of. And if Mars was the site of this horrific catastrophe, doesn't it make sense that in conventional astrology, Mars is the planet of war, and that there is some sort of consciousness energy in that planet associated with aggressiveness, with death and dying, with violence, with rage, and all this type of aggression still associated with that planet, so that when these hyperdimensional geometric relationships occur, because remember, astrology is all about things like triangular relationships, which would be tetrahedral, or squares, which would be cubical or octahedral. Those types of relationships are hyperdimensional geometry. So all astrology really is based on, at least in planetary aspects, planetary alignments, it's based on these geometries. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit to material we're going to get into later, but let's just think about this now, the idea that planetary conjunctions could represent times that this geometry lines up and that consciousness and energy is flowing through these geometric alignments, so that whatever prevailing consciousness is associated with a planet, when it goes into that alignment with us, it has a power. And that great amounts of work were done by this guy Michel Gauquelin, who was able to prove that yes, Mars aspects directly correlate with an increase in these types of careers. So there is a scientific basis for the astrology of Mars having to do with war and aggression and certain types of careers that people with those aspects will then get into. In this particular episode series, we're not so much concerned with the history of Mars as we are with what's going on now. I talked before about some very compelling information that NASA kicked loose in roughly 2012, 2013, where they announced that Mars had once had a watery, actual ocean. And this ocean was a huge development to release, because now it opens up the door to the possibility that Mars had once been like the Earth, and that the face on Mars and the pyramids that we see there we're in fact part of a civilization that originally did have a watery planet. You don't have to go any farther than NASA for that data now. It's right out there in the open. And that changes the game very dramatically. It opens up all kinds of new doors. As our solar system moves into this new energy zone in the galaxy, which NASA has told us about, it's got a lot of magnetism, it's got a lot of heat, it's pushing on the heliosphere, it's changing what they thought the heliosphere looked like. They now have had to recalculate what it even appears to look like from its original idea. All the planets are showing these weird energetic activations, and Mars, of course, is no different. And it just continues to amaze me that with all of this data, that nobody ever puts it together, except for, as I said, when we wrote this thing and it came out in September 2001, this data, that nobody ever puts it together, except for, as I said, when we wrote this thing and it came out in September 2001, shortly thereafter there's 9/11, somebody steals it, shortens it, takes all the references out, takes my credit away, says it was all done by Russian scientists, and that's the version that gets seen by millions of people. But now, after all this time, really nobody's picked up the ball, nobody's done anything with this, and as you're going to see, the data continues to emerge. In fact, it was only about a week ago that new information came out that further validates what the heck is going on with Mars. And I only discovered it as I was putting this last few tweaks on this together so we can be as current as possible for you. So the first thing I want to show you is the idea that clouds and ozone have been growing around Mars where they did not exist before. Now take a look at this. This is from Don Savage and other scientists working on the Hubble Space Telescope website for NASA. And what we see here is that in 1975, as we had plenty of probes going by Mars, there was no atmosphere that was visible of any significance. They did not see clouds. They did not see ozone. Remember, we talked about ozone appearing around Venus in our previous episode. Really amazing data there. Now look at this. Same thing with Mars. You look at these two pictures of Mars, one from June 27th, 97, the next one from only a few days later, July 9th, 1997, and you can actually see these clouds drifting across the surface of the planet, quite dramatically, I might add. They're there, and then they're gone just a couple weeks later. So that is a very active, dynamic atmosphere that Mars had no evidence of ever having back in 1975. It was dry, it was dead, there were no clouds. Cloud systems drifting across the surface of a planet that didn't used to have clouds at all. And they just kind of blithely put it out there and don't really say too much. But let's keep going because there's so much more. In 1997, the same time that this was occurring, NASA sent a probe to Mars to try to get a better look at what was going on. It was called Mars Global Surveyor, or MGS. And in the fall of 1997, they had calculated MGS to go in at a particular angle and burn in through the atmosphere, because they knew there was some degree of an atmosphere they would encounter. Now, this Mars probe has these fins that come out to the side that collect solar energy for its power. And it has other little solar arrays and little stops on it. And what happened was something totally unexpected. They send this little guy in through Mars' atmosphere, and the atmosphere was twice as thick as they had calculated that it should be. And remember, 1997 is when these pictures start coming in showing all these clouds moving around. So the atmosphere was so thick that it actually bent one of the arms on the satellite and damaged it. They had to take it out of its descent, and then they had to bring it back in again on a much shallower descent so that it wouldn't damage the arms. So let's take a look at the slides on this. And this is just a summary. So this was in September 1997, the satellite again called Mars Global Surveyor, and the solar array arms that you're about to see were built by NASA to withstand a certain degree of atmospheric pressure. The probe, as it went into the atmosphere, encountered double the anticipated amount of air that there was supposed to be, and it actually bent the arm back and broke it a little bit, which delayed their supposed to be, and it actually bent the arm back and broke it a little bit, which delayed their photographic mission for an entire year into 1998. So here is a picture of Mars Global Surveyor next to Mars, and you can get a sense of what those arms look like. And I just very recently did a search for this and found this, November 10th, 1997, on CNN. Of course, a lot of their graphics are broken, but it clearly says a glitch causes a 1-year delay in the mapping mission for Mars. A mechanical problem on board the tiny robotic spacecraft orbiting Mars will force a 1-year delay in its main mission to map the entire red planet, U.S. space officials said Monday. Scientists had hoped to begin charting the Martian surface next March, but they said a small fracture in a hinge or yoke between the Mars Global Surveyor and a solar panel has required a slower flight path. Now, what's interesting is that I had come out with this article that got so widely stolen and plagiarized back in 2001 that was based on an interview that Winfrey did with me. And one of the things we talked about was this incident. And in the original NASA reports, they did say that the probe encountered a much greater atmospheric pressure than it was expected to have, a doubling of atmospheric pressure. Dr. Oleksii Dmitriev included that in his paper in an update. However, when I went back and looked now, they said, oh, well, it was already broken before, and we just didn't notice. And so, oops, we sent it in there, and we discovered that it was broken. They changed the story, because originally, think about it, this is NASA. There's billions of dollars in some of these probes, and they are so exacting in their protocols. They have everything mapped out. There's no way that those arms are going to bend as space. It's not like something's going to happen to damage the arm. They build it intact. They build it to be really strong, and it was built to withstand a stress of a certain atmospheric pressure. So now they've kind of scrubbed that, but I did find articles that you can read back in the interplanetary climate change papers I wrote where NASA actually did say that they encountered this doubling of atmospheric pressure. So I was able to find it, but then when I went back now and tried to find it, nothing. So that was very interesting because they don't want you seeing this, and yet we have all this evidence. There were no visible clouds in 1975, yet they were there in 1997, and it damaged this probe, causing a 1-year delay in the mission. Now, here's the next thing I want to show you. This shows up in 1999, a giant Martian hurricane, which you can see right here up near the North Pole. This was 300% larger than any other storm that had appeared in Mars' atmosphere in 30 years, and the storm itself is 400% larger than the state of Texas. It's enormous. And this is on NASA's Hubble website by Ray Villard on May 19th, 1999. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that not only does Mars have an atmosphere, but that just like Earth, it's getting storms, it's getting massive hurricanes, 300% larger than anything they've ever seen. That's climate change. And remember where the Army National Intelligence Office, in that Wired magazine article, said, yeah, the sun is causing climate change, not Earth, not people here. There's some greater phenomenon taking place, and we know what it is. It's got to be this greater magnetic energy, this greater plasma, and the heat and the magnetic force that we're moving into. So now it's activating Mars, causing cyclones, and if you look at this cyclone compared to place, and we know what it is, it's got to be this greater magnetic energy, this greater plasma, and the heat and the magnetic force that we're moving into. So now it's activating Mars, causing cyclones, and if you look at this cyclone compared to a typical one that we see on Earth, it's pretty amazing because, check this out, on Earth, we explain these cyclones as being caused by warm water, but where the heck is the warm water on Mars? We don't have any, and yet we're seeing a hurricane. So something is wrong with our prevailing model, and my model is that these are not actually caused by just water currents, pressure currents in the atmosphere. It's actually gravitational spin that's causing tornadoes and hurricanes and so forth to appear. So this was something that I did in a joint effort with Richard C. Hoagland, and it was back to 2004, And you can see here a very large, one of the most large hurricanes on Earth. And then you look at Mars and you see how big it is. This hurricane was absolutely massive. Now the next one shows up in 2001, just a couple of years later, in which Space.com and NASA, plenty of places had this. The title for the Space.com article was Mars Ski Report, Snow is Hard, Dense, and Disappearing by Robert Roy Britt, who writes many of these, in which they show you that there is global warming taking place on Mars. So much so that ice features are eroding by up to 50% in 1 year. And no, this does not have to do with the normal seasonal variations in the tilt angle of Mars to the sun, which is how they try to explain everything. They always want to call it seasonal change. In fact, one of the working titles I had for my interplanetary climate change paper that I was co-authoring with Richard C. Hoagland, the original working title was Seasons of Change, which was a pun because they're always saying that these things are seasonal changes. Conspiracy theory. You're telling me all the planets in the solar system, once you get through all these episodes with me, we're going to do all the planets. It's the same thing everywhere. They're all tilted at the magic angle to make this work? Come on. That's a conspiracy theory. There's a greater phenomenon. It's so obvious. A lot of times I feel like Galileo, and I'm like, just look through the damn telescope. Look at where we're going. Look at what we're moving into. Look at the ancient prophecies. It's all there. Is it scary to some people? Yes, because we're talking about a discontinuous solar flash change that seems to be a multidimensional activation. All of these things we're seeing now, like with Mars, is the heating up of our solar system building up to that big flash. So when you look at these pictures of ice, look carefully, and I want you to see how the same patterns from 1 year to the next, you can very clearly see where the ice is melting. So let's start on the left. Start on the left and go up to the top left where it says 100 meters, and look at that peninsula where there's this jut out area below the word meters, and then you look over there on the right and the peninsula is gone, and it's just now an island. And then look at the peninsula above that one. That one also has melted away. Then look below the new island that I pointed out, and there is a peninsula between those two spots on the left and the right. On the original one on the left there, you can see it connects, and then on the right it is melted. And you systematically go through, like let's go down to the bottom left of the image on the left and look inside that central area like a lake, and you'll see that there's 3 smaller islands in there. You look over on the right and those 3 islands are gone. And then if you go over to the one on the right, if you look at the image on the right where it says 100M and then go right above that, you can see there's a little island inside that lake on the left. That island is missing on the right. Then if you look on that bottom left pane, you'll see that there is another island with a peninsula, and then on the right the peninsula is gone. So what is this saying? This is looking at the same place from one Martian year to the next. There shouldn't be any overall melting of the ice. There shouldn't be any change. And this is NASA saying global warming on Mars. And they even joke that there's no SUVs up there, at least none that we know of, that could account for this. Apparently, the bases that Corey's talked about, they have some kind of free energy in those vehicles. They don't want to create fossil fuel emissions in their own private bases. That's only for us. So there's a whole lot going on here. Now this next one is really, really stunning. Take a look at this. If you look at this image, we're seeing June 26, 2001 on the left, September 4th, 2001 on the right, a global dust storm that engulfs the entire surface of the planet. That's right. Everywhere you went on this planet, there was this massive dust storm that seems to come from almost nowhere, and it's really only during the month of July, and then just like 4 days at the end of June and 4 days at the beginning of September, so just over 6 weeks, really. And this whole thing pops up out of nowhere. And notice the date. What happened right after September 4th? What happened right after the time Mars turned blood red? Well, that would be September 11th, 2001. Now, what are you saying, David? Are you trying to imply that there's some connection between September 11th and this weird turning of the planet of war to a blood red color? Yes, that is what I'm saying. Let's go back to Dr. Nikolai Kozyrev. Let's go back to the science of torsion fields and the idea that, for example, he studied binary star systems and determined that they reach equilibrium between each other, where they balance each other out. They get to about the same size. They have flickerings between the two of them that occur as if they're in communication. and that speed is vastly faster than light speed, indicating an instantaneous communication. Furthermore, his torsion field studies showed that the position of a star in the sky, you could look at its real position and get a better torsion field than its visible position, which might be many, many tens of thousands of years off based on how far away the star is, due to light speed and how it can take 10,000 years to get to us. So if you aim your torsion field detector at the real position of the star, you actually get a stronger signal. And this means, furthermore, that the torsion fields go into the past and they go into the future. They break Einstein's light cone. They are not only stuck in the present. You can actually have these fields reflect backwards into the past. So what I actually think was happening is that our collective trauma from 9/11 was so extreme that we actually telepathically gated into Mars, a very similar type of warlike event that many of us were on Mars apparently. If you read the Law of One, a lot of us are refugees from there, that we're remembering this much greater war, this much greater destruction of a planet, and our consciousness gates over to Mars backwards in time and activates this global superstorm. It's a pretty cool hypothesis, and one that I've talked about for a long time. And there's a lot more we could do with that, but there's so many changes in Mars, I don't want to just focus on that alone. You just look at this thing, you look at this storm, and you see the scope of what swept across, and it's so amazing. Well, now what we're seeing is much more recent stuff I've never given you before. Starting in 2015, this was a new one I just found recently, a strange and unexpected aurora that was found around Mars. And this was found by the MAVEN space probe, as you can see right here in this news headline. And it was located in spacecraft, detected an ultraviolet glow in the planet's northern hemisphere, and it wasn't supposed to be there. This is new energy. What's especially surprising about the aurora we saw is how deep in the atmosphere it occurs, much deeper than at Earth or elsewhere on Mars, according to Dr. Arnaud Stepin, a MAVEN team member at the University of Colorado. So this is starting to sound a lot like that bow shock that we saw on Venus, which was really deep in the atmosphere. You remember that? And the bow shock was located where there was a big mountain, 5 kilometers tall. The mountain has weird movement. This atmospheric vortex goes 10,000 kilometers up. They'd never seen anything like it before, and they call it a gravitational vortex, moving the atmosphere around. And here we're seeing a weird aurora much deeper in the atmosphere of Mars than it should be in 2015. Very similar. These are massive energetic effects chunking out deeper parts of the atmosphere than we'd ever seen before. And it says here, the electrons producing it must be really energetic. That's interplanetary climate change, once again. And it says less pretty, but possibly even more intriguing, is a dust cloud also detected by MAVEN. While the aurora was unexpectedly deep in the atmosphere, the dust cloud was at an unexpectedly high altitude, about 93 to 190 miles above the surface. It is not clear yet whether this dust cloud is temporary or long-lasting because MAVEN has only been in orbit for 4 months. Scientists do not know how the dust cloud actually got there. So again, the dust cloud and this atmospheric ultraviolet light, that's all stuff that's not supposed to be there, showing the same thing we're seeing, that the planet's atmospheres are changing. They keep getting more energized. And now we're going to get up to the final two. Two different news items that just broke in August 2017, same month while I'm doing this taping. And here's the first one. This is that snow was observed falling on Mars in the summertime, brand new. And you can see it right here from National Geographic. Snow falls on Mars in the summer. The red planet gets a dusting from unexpected bursts of snow flurries according to new atmospheric simulations. This is not supposed to happen, but they observed it. You're going to read that right here. NASA's Phoenix lander, which set itself down near the Mars North Pole in 2008, spotted wispy structures high overhead that looked a lot like Virga streaks on Earth. Here, these streaks are formed when precipitation doesn't quite reach the ground. So scientists concluded that Phoenix had seen a high-altitude snowstorm of water ice. Well, wait a minute. That's not supposed to happen. There's not supposed to be snowstorms that much at those altitudes. Fast forward to 2012, when scientists announced that NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter observed what looked like a cloud of carbon dioxide snowflakes over the southern pole. That, again, is new and unexpected. 10 years ago, this is the key why I highlighted it, only 10 years ago, these water ice clouds were thought to have very little impact on the Mars climate, according to this NASA scientist. Now that we have seen 10 years later, they're having a big impact. And so things become richer and more complex and interesting than we suspected. That is a climate change. That is the same phenomenon once again. So now let's check out some of these images of the snow. This is from another headline where it says, "The red planet turns white. Unexpected snowstorms discovered on Mars." And you're seeing some of these snow patterns that they were talking about. And here is a particular quote from that article. Émeric Spiga, based at the University Pierre and Marie Curie in France. From that article, Émeric Spiga, based at the University Pierre and Marie Curie in France, one of the co-authors of the paper, said of the study, "This is the first time," very important, "the first time anyone has shown that snowstorms or water ice microbursts will occur presently on Mars." They didn't ever see them before, no snowstorms before. We used much more sophisticated and fine-scale modeling than was done before, allowing us to reinterpret existing measurements that posed mysteries. So these are new phenomena, and some of them occur in the northern plains. This is an actual example of how that snow appears. And this is another graphic from the same article, Snowstorms on Mars, and you can pause it here and look at it if you want to, where they talk about the whole thing. They're having to redo what they think. And then, literally, just on the day that we're taping, August 30th, articles were coming out just today about spiders discovered in unexpected places on Mars. And this is not any type of physical arachnid. This is a weird pattern caused by carbon dioxide breaking up through the crust. And it says a totally unexpected find. That's because there's too much carbon dioxide. So this is the spider formation as it looks. And since this just happened, I'm going to get through this for you. It says these spiders aren't eight-legged arachnids. They're unique geologic formations. And it turns out the spider web-like networks of cracks on Mars' surface are much more ubiquitous, meaning much more common than scientists thought, meaning they're new. They're breaking out, carbon dioxide's breaking out and making these things happen more than they should be. Researchers believe the formations, called araniiforms, are created when carbon dioxide turned ice is heated by sunlight as winter turns to spring and gas beneath races to escape the icy layer above. So obviously, if the planet is more carbon dioxide is going to sublimate, and more of these weird spidery cracks are going to appear in the crust. It is global warming yet again. As the gas rushes to escape, it erodes the red planet's surface and leaves behind these spindly, spider leg-like streaks. Until now, planetary scientists believed araniiforms were only found among south polar layered deposits, or SPLDs, which obviously is around the south pole of the planet, which are flat layers of water, ice, and dust. Thousands of volunteers at the citizen science platform Zooniverse have helped researchers scan more than 20,000 images captured by Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's context camera in search of spiders, and they were not disappointed. Several spiders have been identified in areas outside these SPLDs. The discoveries have been confirmed by the orbiter's high-resolution imaging experiment camera. This was a totally unexpected find, according to Meg Schwamm, a researcher at the Gemini Observatory, in a news release. So tie it all together, and what you're seeing now is these spider formations. It's a really cool way to actually visibly observe global warming on Mars. The carbon dioxide is evaporating, it's going through the crust, it damages the crust, creates this pattern, and you see a visible result. So look at the total embarrassment of riches that we have here. There's no clouds visible on Mars before. Then by 1997, you're seeing these clouds racing around. They send in the Surveyor satellite. It breaks the thing. They got to delay it by another year. You see hurricanes appearing on the surface. The hurricanes are huge. There's no warm water to explain where they came from, yet they are 300% larger than anything they've ever seen before. We're seeing the whole planet in 2001 get a global dust. They are 300% larger than anything they've ever seen before. We're seeing the whole planet in 2001 get a global dust storm right before 9/11, suggesting a weird consciousness interaction where our screaming of 9/11 reflected backward in time, which torsion fields can do, and gated into that planet somehow, energizing it in a very, very amazing way. And now we're also seeing them announcing global warming on Mars, and even right up through the present, we're seeing ultraviolet clouds, we're seeing all this crazy stuff. So Mars nails it. And in the next episode, we're diving right into Jupiter on the other side of the asteroid belt. Jupiter by itself is amazing. Its moons are also amazing. I'm going to try to get through all that in one episode, but it is a lot of data, and you will be amazed. I'm David Wilcock. This is Wisdom Teachings, bringing you the information you need that will set you free. And I thank you for watching.